Hello and welcome back to Jarkai dual-wield saber spinning. Last time around we dealt with the inverse version of the Super Obiani, which spiraled up and then came in like that. And I talked about making that first swing kind of wide. It makes it kind of a spiral as it goes back into the inverse Obiani spin. Alright, so that was last video. This time around I wanted to cover the next step. When we were doing the downward wield, we went from the double Obiani into the super double Obiani into the double plum flower. So we're going to do the same thing with the inverse. The inverse double plum flower, just like the standard double plum flower, has different versions. There are really only two, though, as opposed to the three that existed for the downward version. In the downward version, we had the one that went over the head like this. We had the beat added version, which looked like that, which really, if you think about it, is the same thing as a super Obiani, except we're adding another beat to cross over. But there were those two, and then there was the simplified version, where we worked on a forward plane and a sideways plane, where the blade came straight out and straight over, staying close to the body, and then came back into the Obiani. And if you remember in this one, I said that a lot of the force comes from this upward baseball swing. Just to show you. Like that, right there. Okay, so in the inverse version, instead of doing this, we're going to be doing this. And a lot of the force is going to come from this downward motion right there. There is also a version that's over the head, which instead of pulling, we're going to be stabbing. So just to show you what those two look like, let's start with the simplified version. Okay, if the standard simplified version looked like that, now we're going to be doing a downward spin on the off side of the body, drop the blade into the inverse Obiani. Downward, drop, still holding it with my thumb and index finger, around, Obiani, over. And here's that over spin. Right there. Alright, so if I put that together with both hands, it's still going to be timed pretty much the same. I'm timing it off of that downward hack. So, downward hack, downward hack, downward hack. This is the simplified version. It's that same thing that I just showed you with one hand, done with both. Timing it off of when my arm comes forward for that downward hack. I can watch that right out in front of me, and if I keep that timing even, I keep the blades moving at the same speed. Alright, the other version, whereas before we had this version, a little bit of a mess up there we go. Before we had this version of the standard double Obiani, we have another version where instead of pulling over, we're stabbing over. Like that. It's that same downward strike, except instead of cutting, or instead of moving out to the front plane, I'm bringing it all the way over to the side. Otherwise, the move is pretty much the same. So, like this. Same basic move, but a wider transition because we're keeping it all on this plane here. Alright, so between the two of those, you have the two workable versions of the inverse dual plum flower.